Hello, beautiful people! Welcome to episode 11 of the Conscious Hotline, your source for all things conscious and hot. My name is Lakshmi Dede, and I am so excited to be on here today with all of you beautiful people. And we're going to be joined by a really dear friend of mine. And it's funny how the world works. I met this human being in Boulder, Colorado as a result of an artist that I used to pose for their art classes for in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So it's just like amazing how the world works, and I'm very excited to have this human being be joining us today and sharing more about their story of, being in the world and being a gender neutral human being in a really binary space. Even just from the perspective of language, everything is really gendered, especially in other languages. Like I speak German, and in German, every single noun has a gender to it. So it's der Messer, the masculine knife, and then, die Löffel, the feminine spoon. And so I think it's really important to engage in these conversations of finding self and finding identity in a community and a civilization that may not necessarily foster an identity that one adheres to or identifies with in it automatically. So we're going to be diving into those subjects, and I'm just really grateful to have the opportunity to talk about these things with someone that's not only gone through the journey of finding a gender identity that works for them, but also is a therapist, right? So they have like a whole breadth of knowledge on what makes a human tick and what makes a human themselves. So I'm really excited to be joined with them today. Welcome to the show. They're connecting now, and I'm really excited about it. If you have any questions throughout the episode, put them down in the comments. Hi, wonderful.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. It's beautiful outside today.
It looks amazing, and you look beautiful and radiant as always. Yes, so I was just giving the good people a little lowdown on what we're going to be going over today, and thank you for joining the Conscious Hotline.
Yeah, of course.
So every episode we start with a little get to know you to kind of present yourself to the people. We start with a juicy opening question. Okay. And today's question is, if you were to have been written up in the yearbook as most likely for anything, what would it have been in high school?
I don't know. Maybe that's a tough one. Maybe like most likely to travel the world, something like that.
Ooh, that's a great one, especially coming from Minnesota, where people aren't necessarily world travel. It's not like a lot of world travelers come from Minnesota.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Most likely to be world traveler. I don't know how I'd answer that question. So that was a pretty good impromptu or spontaneous response.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm just so grateful for you to join us today and engage in this conversation. And I would love to hear more share whatever you're comfortable sharing of just your journey of your own, finding your own identity.
Yeah.
And I know it's a loaded question, but we'll keep it gender specific since that could go in so many different directions.
Well, it was something that I don't know, where should I begin? Let's see. Yeah, so it's different for everyone. I'll just say that right off the bat. Everyone has their own journey with gender. Everyone is raised with different gender norms. And so this is just my perspective and what I went through. But, growing up, I was always like a tomboy, always kind of not liking dolls, not liking dresses, these really gendered things. And it was kind of I don't know. It was just something my mom had always noticed in me growing up. I wasn't always playing with the girls and doing all that stuff. And I didn't really always feel comfortable being a girl. And I remember when I started hitting puberty and getting breasts, and I was I didn't want them, and I tried to bind them down, and just having a lot of questions around what are these parts and what is my body, and just I think a lot of us go through that.
Side note, my grandmother, who was born and raised and lived in India her whole life, was never taught about her period. And so she never taught my aunt about the period. And when my aunt got her period, she thought she was dying because she was blood is coming out of me. I can't get it to stop.
Yeah.
And no one explained it to her. Mm-hmm. And so you talk about not wanting to binding it down and what is my body? What's happening? And I'm
yeah.
like that happens, I think, to women on so many levels. Like both the social, how do I fit into the social construct of what it means to be whatever gender I was born with, like my sex, but then also like, especially as a woman, like a female body, like I'll say female sex, like the body changes and then you get a period and you're like, oh my God, what's happening? And so I think I think that so many people can identify with what you're saying on so many different levels.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a scary time, like especially developmentally. You know, it's just like a really kind of scary and awkward time for a lot of people. And just a little bit about my background too. Like I was raised in a very traditional, like Roman Catholic Italian family. You know, so like this ideas of gender and gender expression weren't really readily available to me, and I had really no idea that you could be not binary, right? So that was kind of the realm in which I grew up.
The expectations that your hair is this big.
Yeah. And it's not really their fault either, my parents' fault or my family's fault. It's just like, you know, the time and the culture that I grew up in. But yeah, so then
I love what you said. It's no one's fault. Like no one's to blame. It is what it is. We're, you know, our parents are our parents.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been some issues with some things down the road with my family, but, you know, nothing that we haven't overcome. But yeah, and then, you know, just like growing up and like being in high school, I wasn't really sure about my identity. Things felt weird. And that was also too when I was realizing that my sexuality was also a lot different than my heteronormative friends. Like it was like I liked men and women and like everyone in between. And I wasn't really sure what that meant. And so once I got into my 20s, you know, my gender and my sexuality felt like really intertwined. And it took me like really taking a look at myself to parse those apart because they are different. Like the way that I feel about myself and the way that I want to express myself to the world is my gender expression and my gender identity. And the people who I am attracted to and want to sleep with, like that's my sexuality. And so really like learning all these terms and like talking to people in the community about like what am I feeling, what am I going through was really what helped me to, you know, name what I am and move forward and learn about myself. So
yeah, and I think that, thank you for sharing, and I think that's such a beautiful analogy for like anything in life where learning what is it, like first you have to learn to name it, learn to identify it, learn about it, and then learn how it relates to you personally. And like even you saying, yeah, like my gender identity and my sexuality are two completely separate things. Like I don't know how many people have taken the time to parcel those out, you know, those different layers. And I mean, for myself, I wasn't introduced to any of this until college, until I took courses on this. And then I learned about like Z and they, them. And there was even a period where I was like, do I want to identify with being a woman? And like thinking about like that gets to be a choice.
Yeah.
You know, and that choice was never presented to me or in my awareness until I was like in my 20s. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And just so everyone knows, I do identify as a pansexual, gender fluid person. So just so I have that out there.
And could you kind of tell what that is, just for people that may not have the vocabulary?
So, yeah, pansexual for me means that I'm attracted to the person and not necessarily what's going on with their body. So that can be anyone who's like non-binary, like myself, someone who's feminine or masculine or male or female, or trans or anything that, basically anyone that I'm attracted to.
You're attracted to the human, the being, the spirit, and not the whatever else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been really fun.
Well, and it sounds like the purest way to love. Like that's how we should be loving, right? Like we should be loving human-centered first. And like it shouldn't be about like how you look or whatever people said you were supposed to be. It should be about who you are. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then for me, gender fluid, there's a lot of different words to describe non-binary, but for me, I like the word gender fluid, just because that's kind of how I feel I am. I'm very fluid, like day to day, my gender expression can change for me. Like today I'm feeling a little bit maybe more feminine and queenie, and I'm like, got my makeup on and, you know.
I saw it. Looks good, boo.
You know, some days I don't wear makeup, and, you know, a lot of my expression is tied up in the way that I present myself to the world every day. And, you know, I am an artist as well, and I'm stepping out in my art every day, and my art is myself. And so for me, gender fluid is like this fluidity that I get to play with and experiment with every day. So, yeah, that's what it means to me.
People always ask me, are you an artist? And I'm like, yeah, my life is my art. It's like,
totally.
I don't paint, I don't
very
draw.
valid.
Like, yes, I'm an artist. how I live is creative, okay?
It's true. Lakshmi, you're 100% artist. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. 100% bona fide artist, baby.
Yeah.
So are you. You don't need me to tell you that. Yeah, and I also love that because, again, just like with loving, how you're like, I love person first. With yourself, you're like, I express all of who I am, and that changes, right? Because if I'm the same person all the time, well, then I'm not growing. If I'm not growing, I'm dying, right? Like, you're growing or you're dying. You're one of those two things. That's what's happening with a plant. A plant is growing or it's dying. Sometimes it's doing both at the same time. That's how I feel right now. And totally. So I'm just curious for yourself of like, you know, it's one thing to know these things about yourself, and it's another thing to live them. And so I'd love to know what gave you the courage to express it to the world, not just in your own experience.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a little scary when I first realizing that, like, I'm not just woman, like, it's not, or not just, but I'm not wholly woman, right? And there was a time where I was really scared of that, and I didn't really know how to have these conversations with people, or like, you know, or have the courage really to explore that, because it is scary. But I think when I started at Naropa University, I met a lot of really cool friends, and I had these conversations with them, like, hey, like, I think I want to switch my pronouns, like, and I'm scared about that. Will you help me? And, you know, a couple of my
even
friends
just the vulnerability to be able to say, will you help me?
Yeah, because
like,
I was just starting to feel like I wasn't living authentically. I wasn't being congruent, because, I mean, it's like this anxiety whenever people were calling me she, her, hers. It was like I just, every time it was like, ugh, like I just felt like a hit, you know? And so I was like, I need to do something about this. So let's take baby steps. And I asked my friends, and they're so supportive. And I asked a couple of them to start calling me they, them when it was just us hanging out. And it felt so good. And it felt so right. And so it's really thanks to them that I was able to really like claim this for myself, and be here with you.
Yeah, and thanks for being here. And I think that speaks to the power of community. You know, in anything we want to do, if we want to, even something as small as wearing our hair differently or doing something abnormal, like to have friends that are like, yes, I support you in that. You can. And like, that can make a world of difference. And I'm just really touched by that also, because it shows that one can step into a new identity, and it doesn't have to be this like, I'm fully certain this is how it is, I'm super confident in it. You know, it can be like I'm figuring this out, and I think that you can help me figure it out, and you don't have to have all the answers, and I don't have to have all the answers, and we can come together. And I think that's really courageous, and I think that's really beautiful. And again, I think it speaks to the power of like, I'm not one to promote like people should go to college. I'm like, you should do what feels right for you. And I think there's so much power in, like you said, I went to Naropa and I was able to like enter into these new environments and have different types of conversations. And like, that's the power of being in a space where people are committed to learning. And that can happen in a multitude of environments, but college just so happens to be like a traditional one. So I think
it would have eventually happened, but I think that being in a place, especially like Naropa, and training to become a therapist, we're like looking at ourselves every day, right? And we're processing every day. And so I think it really like brought up to the surface, and I had to look at it, and then I was scared too, but now I'm so happy that I did, because I feel like really embodied in that.
So it fits, they, them, fits, and it feels like, how does it land in your body?
To me, it just feels right. Like it's an acknowledgement of some of the journey that I've had, and some of the hard time that I've had trying to figure this out, you know?
Yeah.
And it makes me like proud, and honestly, like a lot of times people will call me she, her, hers, because I definitely present femme, and that's okay. And I get it. People like don't know or haven't told them, or, you know, they're getting used to it. And like, I have some grace for that. Like, I can understand that it takes some people time to readjust to these things, but you know, and I also have a lot of friends that are really really trying hard, and like they're like, oh, I messed up, you know, and it's like okay, you're trying.
That's me. I'm that way sometimes. I'll own it.
But it's like
I'm committed to honoring you, and I totally
yeah.
like want to call you what you want to be called, and everyone for that matter. Like,
yeah,
I don't care if someone wants to be called a bunny rabbit. Like, if you whatever you want to be called, like I want to call you that, because you know I went through my own transition of going from Sylvie to Lakshmi, which is
right.
Lakshmi is like my true Indian name, but we all had to go by our white person name until we were old enough to stand up to racism, because my dad didn't want us to experience discrimination. Mm-hmm. And I still, like, anyone that knows me as Sylvie, I'm like, you can call me Sylvie, that's fine. But then anyone new, it's Lakshmi. And then it gets really hazy because when I'm with an old friend and they introduce me as Sylvie, then I have to tell everyone, actually, I go by Lakshmi. They call me Sylvie, but everyone else has to call me Lakshmi.
Yeah. I have a similar thing happen too, like with old friends, like she, hers, and then new friends, like they, them, and then there's like almost like this, like, you know, like
it's too
weird,
worlds,
like
right?
Dynamic, yeah.
I kind of like it because it's like, oh, I know this person pre-circa 2009.
Yeah.
Like anyone that calls me Sylvie knows me from before 2009, and anyone that calls me Lakshmi knows me after that. So
totally.
What's it like for you and your family?
Yeah, so the family's a little different. You know, I've definitely had to do some educating with my parents. They still don't really fully understand, so that's a little challenging, but, you know, they still love me and they still support me. They don't really get, I think, quite what I'm talking about, so maybe they're watching this later and they'll get a little bit of an idea. But my sister's been really supportive, and, you know, for them, I say, like, hey, you know what, I'm your daughter, I'm your sister, like, I still use those words with them, and I'm like, you know, you've known me my whole life. Like, if you don't call me they, them, it's totally okay. But I would appreciate it if you tried. But I understand if you can't, you know, or if it's just, you know.
Why is it that you're giving them that grace?
You know, I think that right now, because this is still like a couple years new for me, like really claiming they, them. And I think it's different for everyone. For me, my family's going through a lot right now, and I just don't feel like it's necessary to like really like keep them on it right now.
It's not like the battle to fight at this moment.
Yeah, like I think our family just has a lot of other things going on that we need to really focus on. That's not to say that they should be saying what I'm asking them, but yeah, it's just a timing thing, you know. I've been able to talk to them about it. They've listened, and you know, hopefully they'll be able to be on board soon.
Yeah, and it seems like you said the love is there.
Yeah.
And so everything else.
Yeah, I don't feel rejected. I definitely, when I came out as pansexual, or at the time bisexual, there was definitely some pushback and not the best circumstances. So I think they kind of learned from that coming out to this one to maybe have a little more grace. So.
Yeah, if you don't mind me asking again, just because I think it might be helpful for listeners, was the pushback, like, were you surprised by where it was coming from and who?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I understand where they're coming from, just because they have such conservative views and they're not really into these, I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that question. I was going to say something, but I just lost it.
That's okay. I'll share a personal anecdote.
Okay.
While you think about it. So I had a girlfriend in college, like my first serious relationship with a woman, and I brought her to Thanksgiving, and I didn't say, this is my girlfriend, everyone. I just said, lady's coming to dinner. Ironically, her name is Lady, which is great. Like, I just love that was her name. And we're at Thanksgiving, we're all eating whatever, and my like 1,000,000-year-old German, 100% German grandmother's like, so is this your girlfriend or something? I just remember like no one had said anything. We're like normal Thanksgiving, and at Thanksgiving, like there's always extra people added, you know. So like, I think people are just intuitive, and they just like knew that I had a girlfriend and that was her. Like I don't know how my grandmother. I don't know what happened that made her be like, so is this your girlfriend or something? And everyone was silent and looking at me. Like my sisters knew, and I was like, you know, Mutti, this is my girlfriend, and yes, and. Of course, there was anxiety. Like, I'm 20-something years old. And I'm just like, oh, my God, my super German grandma, like church, all that stuff. Right. And it was like, I think she just wanted me to own it. And it was a non-conversation after that. Like, she just wanted to know, like, oh, this is your girlfriend. And then I said it. And then, like, I was so scared to tell my dad because he's super Catholic. And he goes, "Oh my God, this is such a relief." I was like, "What? Like me being in a lesbian relationship is a relief?" And he goes,
Yeah.
"Well, now I don't have to worry about you getting pregnant. This is great. I'm happy."
Oh my God.
I was like, yeah, exactly. It's like, well, it's just so funny how parents are. So my reason for asking that about the pushback was just, because I was really shocked. I thought my grandmother would be totally chill and my dad would be like a problem. And instead my grandma was like weird about it because I think she just wanted it out there. And then my dad was like super chill and like, "Great, wonderful, love it. Keep it up."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like it's 2020. I think things are hopefully getting easier for young people coming out, and hopefully this trend will just keep going in the positive direction.
Definitely. I mean, think about Gen Z's kids.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what their kids are going to be like on outer space. I don't know what their kids are going to be, but it's going to be progressive for sure. The future is changing. Hopefully.
Yeah, I'm excited for it, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm holding space for that too. So, how has it been, or do you have any words of wisdom for people listening that maybe are on their own journey of, I mean, everyone's on a journey of self-discovery. So like everything that you're talking about can apply to everybody in any capacity, but particular to being a Gestalt therapist in training and going through the journey of finding an identity that feels right for you and your bones. How has that training supported you in this journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, it's definitely different for everyone, but I think there are certain things about yourself that are under the surface and are just waiting to come out. And it's maybe something that you've known your whole life, or maybe it's something that's new as you're developing. But for me, I think I had an inkling about a lot of things about myself, but I just was pushing them down or not looking at them in a clear light, or trying to repress memories or all these other things. But I think what therapy does, and especially with Gestalt therapy, is it brings you into the present moment. And whatever's coming up, you just name for yourself, and like get into this habit of naming what you're feeling and naming your emotions and being with.
Kind of like what kids do.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think through that process, you become more open in general. You become a little more honest, and then things don't surprise you about yourself as much, and in a way that can also be really regulating, at least for me. But yeah, I've done a lot of work with just working with the present moment, and that will bring in all your anxieties of the past and all these things about yourself that are alive in you in the present. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. And could you just, for, again, people that may not know Gestalt therapy, how would you describe it? Like exactly that, just working with things in the present?
Yeah. So Gestalt therapy was started in the 50s, I think it was, with Fritz Perls, and it's definitely changed a lot since then. But it's definitely centered around a present moment, like working in the present moment, right? So dealing with whatever is coming up, and also being really aware of like body sensations. Like people will be like, "Where is that in your body?" Like that's a Gestalt thing. Like if you're like that's, yeah. I should be able to describe this a little better, but
no, I think that's great. Basic is the most fundamental is the best way, and should. Yeah. I'm out with that word. There's a great book called The Crossroads Between Should and Must by I think her name's Ella Luna. Have you read it?
No.
She's a painter, and she was like working in tech in San Francisco and miserable, and was like, "I've always wanted to be a painter. Fuck it, I'm gonna quit my job and I'm gonna become a painter." And she painted this whole book, and so it's like an interactive book that you write in, and it's all about being at that crossroads of what she should do with her tech job versus her must, her soul's calling. And her soul's calling was to like, sell it all, move into a tiny studio and become a painter and paint this book, and it's beautiful. And I wrote in it, and I like just made it my own because it's such a creative book. I was being creative in it and drawing in it. And I met her, and I brought my book for her to sign, and she looked through it, and she like was in tears, like, "This is exactly what I want people to do with this book." So it's a great book. Definitely read it if you're interested in that. The Crossroads of Should and Must. And that's been a word I'm really trying to stay out of my vocabulary because I don't want to should anything.
Right? Yeah, and it's actually really interesting that you brought up should, because that's yeah, shoulds like cripple us, I feel like. And even with like gender expression, like I should look this way or it should be this way, and like I know a
Or
lot
if
of
I'm
people.
gender non-binary, then I can't wear lipstick because it's too
Right?
femme, or
Yes.
I have to wear this, or yeah.
Thems can be femmes too.
I love that. Is that a quote? Is that a thing? It
Yes,
should
it's a
be.
thing.
Oh yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like a thing.
Yeah, thems can be femmes too. Yeah.
Femmes can be femmes.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
actually, I have a lot of, or not a lot, I have a few friends that are like, they look very femme, but they also they want to be using them pronouns, but they're scared that no one will take them seriously because they present so feminine, and they don't want to make themselves more androgynous or masculine looking because that's not true to their expression. And so there's also like this like delicate um, reality in that too, so yeah.
Yeah. And how has it been like navigating the world? We talked about your family, we talked about your educational community, and then your employment community as a therapist. And it seems like all of those environments have been very like open, receptive, and especially in the therapy world, it's like know yourself, and if that's yourself, then be yourself.
Yeah.
But how is it just navigating social stuff?
Yes, I mean social stuff. I think that I surround myself with people that are generally pretty accepting. Some of my friends still don't really understand, like they're like, oh, it doesn't make grammatical sense, or oh, like it's clunky, or oh, it's whatever, this, that, the other, and I'm like,
oh, really, what that means is I'm struggling with this, and therefore
right.
I want to put it down because it's uncomfortable for me.
Exactly. And I just, for me, like, I'm like, if you'd like to have a conversation about this, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. But also know that people who are gender non-binary or non-conforming, like, don't always want to have this conversation with you. Just because I'm willing to, don't assume everyone else will. Mm-hmm. And so because I am...
That's true for race too, people listening. Yes. It is not Black people's job to educate you on racism and systemic racism and the history of racism in this country and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a very personal and intimate thing, like just like race. Like, it's not something you always want to have to like be the spokesperson for, but I just so happen to be okay with talking about it and enjoy talking about it. And yeah, so.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having this conversation with me. I feel really blessed. And at the risk of sounding cliche, I will say that I think just knowing the brief snippets that I do about your family and Minnesota culture in general, I think it's extraordinarily brave and courageous and grounded in self-awareness that you can claim your identity and ask that people meet you there and honor it.
Thank you, Lakshmi.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I wanted to ask, how do you see your own self-discovery feeding into your work? And, I heard you say I'm open to having these conversations. So if this is something that you plan on bringing into your therapy work as like a focus or a specialty?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just in general, I'm open to like LGBTQ and kink people, especially just because I have like a good knowledge base in both of those worlds. So
sounds fun. Like, I'll work with you.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just available to talk about these things both in session or as friends. But I wouldn't say that like, I just say I'm open to it if you want to talk to me about it. Not that like I have a specialty in it. It's just who I am and what I love to do. And I'm actually working at Medicine Horse right now for my internship, and they are also very LGBTQ friendly, and they're taking on a lot of LGBTQ clients right now, working with the horses. So if you want to come and work with me there, or we can just talk on Instagram or whatever, I'm open to have these conversations.
Beautiful. So I mean, I've been tagging you, but I will tag you in the show link. And then I'm sure once you're fully certified and done, you'll have some sort of a website or something, and the link will be in your bio. So stay tuned for more juicy wisdom from Frankie. And if there's, I love ending every episode with like a message to the world. And what I'd love to know for you is like speaking to people that, the person in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who might feel a pang every time they're called a specific gender, but has no context, support, or community for navigating that. What would you say to them?
I would say, let's see. You got it. Like, just keep going. Like, persevere. We're all waiting for you on the other side, wherever you are. You are amazing. You are loved. You are perfect the way you are. Yeah. And just come find us.
The party's here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Listen to Britney Spears' speech that she gave at the LGBTQ awards. Like, it's on her Instagram, but she was like, I would like to thank the LGBTQIA community for the funnest nights of my life.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, so good. Well, thank you. I love you. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you,
and just thanks for sharing your wisdom and your story. It was inspiring for me, and I know others will source inspiration from it as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is so fun.
Appreciate you.
All right.
Bye.